The massive computer screens of the Galactic Council's Xenobiology department flickered with endless streams of data from across the galaxy. Chief Analyst Zefter sat at his workstation, his forearms moving quickly across holographic interfaces. As he processed the latest batch of first contact reports, the office buzzed with the quiet hum of advanced technology and the soft clicking sounds his species made when concentrating. Today's assignment was particularly interesting. A new species had made contact with the Outer Rim trading posts. The file labeled Humans, Earth Origin, appeared on his primary screen. Zefter opened the preliminary assessment and began reading through the biological data that had been collected during the initial diplomatic exchanges. Physical characteristics seemed unremarkable. Average height of 1.8 meters, which put them in the medium-sized category. No natural armor plating like the Thurok species. No venomous capabilities like the Xylan traders. Their skin appeared thin and easily damaged, lacking the protective scales or chitinous covering that most successful galactic species possessed. Zefter made a note in the danger assessment column. The muscle density readings caught his attention next. Humans showed moderate physical strength, roughly equivalent to a Velkan merchant or Zephyrian diplomat. Nothing approaching the raw power of a Graxian warrior or the crushing grip strength of the silicon-based Kronax. Their bone structure looked fragile compared to species that had evolved on high-gravity worlds. Another mark in the moderate category, Zephatar, reviewed their technological capabilities with growing certainty about his classification. The humans had achieved faster-than-light travel, which was impressive for a new species, but their ships seemed primitive compared to Galactic Council standards. Their weapons were mostly kinetic-based projectile systems and simple energy weapons. No quantum disruptors, no reality warping devices, no temporal manipulation technology. Standard moderate-level civilization markers, the lifespan data showed. Humans lived approximately 80 galactic standard cycles. Not particularly long compared to species like his own, which could live for 300 cycles, but not unusually short either. Average intelligence scores based on their mathematical and scientific achievements placed them solidly in the normal range. They had developed spaceflight relatively quickly after discovering atomic energy, which showed decent problem-solving abilities. Zefter pulled up the social structure analysis. Humans lived in tribal groups they called nations with complex hierarchical systems. They showed evidence of cooperative behavior, but also had a documented history of internal conflicts. This was typical for most species at their development level. The psychological profile indicated they formed strong emotional bonds and showed protective instincts toward their offspring and social groups. The climate adaptability tests were mildly interesting. Humans seemed capable of surviving in a wide range of environmental conditions, which was useful for a spacefaring species. However, they required specific atmospheric compositions and temperature ranges to function optimally. Nothing exceptional, their most carbon-based life forms had similar requirements. Zefter began filling out the official classification form. Physical danger rating, moderate. The humans could probably handle themselves in basic conflicts, but would likely struggle against more advanced predator species. Technological threat level, standard. Their weapons and defensive systems posed no significant concern to established galactic civilizations. Social stability, moderate. They showed typical signs of a developing spacefaring culture with room for growth. The computer system suggested classification parameters based on his input data. Cross-referencing with similar species in the galactic database, humans appeared to fit perfectly into the Class 3 moderate danger category. This placed them alongside species like the peaceful Velkan traders, the scholarly Zephyrian diplomats, and the artistic Melodian culture builders, species that were pleasant to interact with, occasionally useful for specific tasks, but generally unremarkable in the broader galactic community. Zefter approved the classification and transmitted it to the diplomatic corps. Junior diplomats would be assigned to handle human relations, as there seemed to be little need for senior staff involvement. Standard trading privileges would be granted, allowing humans access to basic galactic markets and common areas of trading stations. They would receive moderate security clearances and access to general-purpose technology exchanges. The xenobiologist felt satisfied with his thorough analysis. The humans seemed like a straightforward case, another moderate species joining the thousands of civilizations that made up the peaceful middle tier of galactic society. They would probably find their niche in small-scale trading or perhaps cultural exchange programs. Some might even prove useful as research assistants or administrative support staff for more advanced species. As he filed the official report, Zefter glanced at some of the more detailed behavioral observations that had been included in the raw data. There were mentions of something called adrenaline response that seemed to alter human capabilities under stress. The field researchers had noted unusual problem-solving approaches that didn't follow standard logical patterns. There were references to concepts like improvisation and thinking outside the box that seemed important to human culture. However, these behavioral quirks appeared to be simple, cultural differences rather than anything significant from a threat assessment perspective. Every species had unique psychological traits that seemed important to them but rarely translated into meaningful advantages in the broader galactic context. The Melodians thought their artistic temperament was crucial, the Zephyrians believed. Their philosophical nature gave them special insights, and the Velkans were convinced their trading instincts were unmatched. Yet all of them remained moderate-level civilizations. Zefter closed the human file and moved on to his next assignment. A species of crystalline beings from the Andromeda sector who showed promising mineral extraction capabilities, the humans, were now officially processed and classified, ready to take their place as another unremarkable addition to the galactic community. Meanwhile, light years away from the Xenobiology department, a human exploration vessel called the New Horizon was approaching its first alien space station. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the massive structure grow larger on the view screen. His crew moved efficiently around him, preparing for what would become humanity's first major diplomatic contact with galactic civilization, Navigator. Lisa Carter checked their approach vector one final time while engineer Tony Rodriguez monitored the ship's systems. Communications Officer Amy Walsh worked on establishing proper contact protocols with the alien traffic control systems. None of them knew that they had just been classified as a moderate danger species, placed in the same category as peaceful. Traders and scholarly diplomats, the stage was set for what would become known throughout the galaxy as the greatest classification error in Galactic Council history. The New Horizon docked with Station Kepler 7 with a soft mechanical thud that echoed through the airlocks. Captain Jake Morrison checked his uniform one last time before stepping into the corridor where his senior staff waited. Lisa Carter held a data pad containing their diplomatic protocols, while Tony Rodriguez carried a toolkit of basic instruments for technical assessments. Amy Walsh had her translation equipment ready. Though the preliminary communications suggested the aliens had developed universal translation systems, the airlock opened with a hiss of equalizing atmosphere, and Jake got his first look at alien architecture. The corridor stretched before them like a gleaming metal cathedral, with walls that curved impossibly high and seemed to pulse with soft blue light. The scale was enormous, clearly built for beings much larger than humans. Jake felt small as he led his team forward, their footsteps echoing in the vast space. Their first sight of alien life came around a corner where a group of towering creatures stood near what appeared to be an information kiosk. The beings stood nearly 3 meters tall, with thick gray skin that looked like natural armor plating. Their movements were slow and deliberate as they gestured with massive arms toward holographic displays. Lisa Carter whispered that these must be the Thurok warriors mentioned in their briefing materials. A smaller alien approached the human delegation, walking upright on 2 legs but barely reaching Jake's shoulder in height. Its skin was smooth and pale green, and it had 4 arms that moved in careful, precise gestures. Large black eyes studied the humans with what seemed like polite interest rather than excitement. "Greetings, beings from the world called Earth," the alien said through a small translation device attached to its chest. I am Junior Diplomat Crixinel, assigned to assist your species during this initial cultural exchange period. I trust your journey was satisfactory for a moderate-level civilization. Jake noticed the casual way the alien said moderate level, but decided not to comment. Thank you for welcoming us, Diplomat Crixinel. I'm Captain Jake Morrison, and this is my senior staff. We're honored to be here and eager to learn about galactic civilization. Crixinel made a gesture that might have been the equivalent of a nod. Excellent. I have prepared suitable accommodations for your delegation in Section C7, which houses visiting species of similar classification levels. You will find the facilities adequate for your biological requirements. Your quarters are located near those of the Velkan Trading Delegation and the Zephyrian Cultural Exchange Group. As they walked through the station, Jake observed the incredible diversity of alien life around them. Beings of every imaginable shape and size moved through the corridors, some floating, others walking on multiple legs, and a few that seemed to phase in and out of visibility. The humans drew curious glances, but no particular attention. They seemed to blend into the background noise of moderate-level species. Tony Rodriguez kept looking up at the engineering marvels surrounding them. The lighting systems appeared to be integrated directly into the station's structure, and the artificial gravity felt perfectly stable despite the station's massive size. He wanted to examine the technology more closely, but noticed that certain areas were marked with symbols that probably meant restricted access. Amy Walsh struggled with the communication systems as they passed various information terminals. The translation protocols seemed designed for species with simpler linguistic structures. When she tried to access more detailed information about station services, the system kept defaulting to basic overviews clearly intended for visiting species with limited technical capabilities. Their quarters turned out to be functional but unremarkable. The rooms were small by human standards, with basic sleeping platforms and minimal amenities. Crixinel explained that these accommodations were standard for moderate-level species, though he could arrange for upgrades if they found the current setup insufficient. Jake politely declined, not wanting to appear demanding during their first diplomatic contact. Your species will have access to the common areas, basic trading facilities, and cultural exchange zones, Crixinel continued. The central markets offer goods and services appropriate for your technological level. Advanced technology sections require higher security clearances, which are typically reserved for more established galactic civilizations. Lisa Carter made notes on her datapad while studying the station layout Crixinel provided. She noticed that their access seemed quite limited compared to what she could observe through the corridor windows. Massive ships docked at higher levels of the station, and she could see beings in elaborate uniforms, moving through areas that were clearly off-limits to moderate species. The diplomatic tour continued through several common areas where Jake's team observed other species going about their daily business. The Velkan traders seemed friendly enough, conducting business with quiet efficiency. The Zephyrians appeared to be scholars or philosophers, engaged in deep conversations around floating holographic displays. Both groups nodded politely to the humans but showed no particular interest in extended contact. Jake began to sense that their classification as a moderate-level species carried more implications than he had initially realized. The aliens were polite and helpful, but there was an underlying assumption that humans were basically harmless and probably not very important in the larger galactic community. It reminded him of how adults might treat children at a formal dinner party, welcome, but not expected to contribute much to serious conversations. The thought bothered him more than he wanted to admit. Humanity had worked hard to reach the stars, and their technology might be different from alien standards, but it was far from primitive. Jake had commanded military vessels that could devastate entire planetary surfaces, and he had seen human engineers solve problems that seemed impossible. Yet here they were, being treated like junior members of some cosmic country club. Amy Walsh finished setting up their communication equipment in the quarters and reported an interesting discovery. The station's emergency alert systems were configured to send only basic warnings to moderate-level species. with detailed tactical information reserved for higher classification levels. She could detect multiple communication channels, operating on frequencies that their equipment wasn't supposed to access. Tony Rodriguez had been examining the room's environmental systems and found them surprisingly adaptable. The aliens had clearly done their homework on human biological requirements, but the technology seemed over-engineered for such a simple task. He suspected the station's life support systems were capable of far more than basic atmospheric regulation, possibly including rapid emergency modifications for extreme situations. As the first day on Station Kepler 7 drew to a close, Jake Morrison gathered his team for a private discussion. They had been welcomed, accommodated, and politely categorized as a minor player in galactic civilization. None of them realized that this comfortable assumption was about to be tested in the most dramatic way possible. When the station's peaceful routine would be shattered by an attack that would force humans to show exactly why their moderate classification was the biggest mistake the aliens had ever made. The emergency alarm started screaming at exactly 0347 station time, jolting everyone from sleep with their piercing wail. Jake Morrison was awake instantly, his military training kicking in as he rolled out of the narrow sleeping platform and reached for his uniform. The sound was universal, the kind of alarm that meant serious trouble regardless of what species designed it. Red warning lights flashed through the small windows of their quarters, casting everything in an ominous glow. Jake could hear running footsteps in the corridors outside as station personnel responded to whatever crisis had triggered the alert system. He activated his communication device and contacted his team. "Morrison here, everyone report in immediately." "Carter here, awake." "And ready," came Lisa's voice, crisp and professional despite being woken from deep sleep. "Rodriguez checking in, already analyzing the station's power fluctuations," Tony reported, his engineer instincts automatically assessing the situation. "Walsh ready, trying to access the emergency communication channels," Amy added, her fingers already working on her translation equipment. Jake opened his door and stepped into the corridor where other moderate-level species were emerging from their quarters, looking confused and frightened. The Velkin traders huddled together, their large eyes darting nervously at the flashing lights. The Zephyrian scholars seemed frozen in place, apparently overwhelmed by the sudden disruption to their peaceful environment. Crixinel appeared at the end of the corridor, moving quickly on his short legs while speaking rapidly into a communication device. When he spotted the humans, he approached with obvious relief at having one less problem to manage during the crisis. "Captain Morrison, please return to your quarters immediately," the diplomat said, his forearms gesturing urgently. "The station is under attack by raiders. Standard protocol requires all moderate-level species to remain in secure areas until the situation is resolved by station security forces." "Attack?" Jake asked, his mind immediately shifting into tactical mode. "What kind of raiders? How many ships?" Crixinel seemed surprised by the questions. "Please do not concern yourself with such details. These matters are handled by properly equipped military forces. Your species lacks the necessary capabilities to assist in such situations. The station's defensive systems will resolve this minor inconvenience shortly." Jake exchanged glances with his team, all of whom had gathered in the corridor. The casual dismissal of human capabilities bothered him, especially when people's lives might be at stake. "Diplomat Crixinel, my ship has defensive capabilities. We could provide assistance if needed." The alien made a sound that might have been laughter. "Captain Morrison, I appreciate your species' enthusiasm, but this is not a situation for moderate-level civilizations to become involved in. Please return to your quarters where you will be safe until this matter is concluded." Amy Walsh had been working on her equipment and suddenly looked up with concern. "Captain, I'm picking up multiple hostile signals. These aren't small raiders. This looks like a coordinated attack by a full battle group." Crixinel's expression shifted to something approaching annoyance. "Communications officer, you should not be accessing tactical frequencies. Those channels are restricted to species with appropriate security clearances." Tony Rodriguez was studying a wall-mounted display panel that showed station schematics. The power grid is fluctuating in Section 7. Looks like they've taken damage to primary systems. If those conduits fail, life support could be compromised in multiple sectors. Engineer Rodriguez, please step away from the technical displays, Crixinel said firmly. Station maintenance is handled by qualified personnel from advanced civilizations. Your species does not have clearance for such information. Jake felt his patience wearing thin as explosions echoed through the station's hull. Whatever was attacking them was doing serious damage, and the aliens seemed more concerned with maintaining their bureaucratic protocols than dealing with the crisis. Crixinel, people are going to die if those power systems fail. My engineer knows what he's doing. Captain, with respect, your species has been classified as moderate level for very good reasons, the diplomat replied, his tone becoming condescending. Station Commander Vorthak has requested military assistance from the Galactic Defense Fleet. Proper forces will arrive within 6 hours to handle this situation. Until then, all moderate and low-level species must remain in designated safe areas. Lisa Carter had been studying the emergency information displays and turned to Jake with a grim expression. Captain, if I'm reading these correctly, the attackers have already disabled 2 of the station's main defensive platforms. They're systematically taking out the external weapons. Another massive explosion shook the station, strong enough to make everyone grab the walls for support. The lights flickered ominously, and Jake could hear the subtle change in the air circulation system that meant power was being rerouted from non-essential systems. Amy Walsh pressed her earpiece closer and listened intently to the tactical frequencies she had managed to access. Captain, the lead attack ship is identifying itself as the Void Reaper under Captain Ben Sullivan. They're demanding the station surrender all cargo and technological databases. Ben Sullivan? Jake repeated, recognizing the name from intelligence briefings. That's a human name. Crixinel looked genuinely shocked. Impossible. No moderate-level species engages in deep space piracy. The classification system prevents such activities by ensuring appropriate oversight of dangerous civilizations. Jake realized that the aliens' rigid classification system had created a massive blind spot in their security thinking. They couldn't conceive of moderate-level species becoming significant threats because their entire worldview depended on the assumption that dangerous species were automatically classified as high-level civilizations. Diplomat Crixinel, I need to contact my ship immediately, Jake said, his voice taking on the authority of a military commander. If there are human pirates out there, they're not following any galactic classification protocols. Captain Morrison, I cannot authorize you to leave the secure area, Crixinel protested, but his confidence was clearly shaken by the revelation that humans might be involved in the attack. The station shuddered again as another defensive platform was destroyed. Emergency lighting activated in the corridors, casting everything in harsh white light. Jake could hear the fear in the voices of other species as they realized their supposedly safe station was being systematically dismantled by attackers who weren't following the expected rules. Tony Rodriguez checked his readings again and looked up with concern. Captain, if they keep hitting the power grid at this rate, we'll lose artificial gravity within the hour. After that, life support starts failing in non-essential sections. Jake made his decision. Amy, contact the New Horizon and tell them to prepare for immediate departure. Tony, I want you to analyze those power fluctuations and figure out how to stabilize them. Lisa, plot me an intercept course for those raiders. Captain Morrison, I must insist that you follow station protocols, Crixinel said desperately, but Jake was already moving toward the docking bay where their ship waited. The New Horizon launched from Station Kepler 7 just as another explosion rocked the massive structure. Jake Morrison gripped his command chair as the ship cleared the docking bay, immediately coming under fire from 3 raider vessels that had been waiting in ambush positions. The bridge lights flickered as energy blasts struck their shields, but Tony Rodriguez had modified the power systems during their brief stay at the station. Shields holding at 80%, Tony reported from his engineering station, his fingers dancing across controls that no alien engineer would recognize. I've rerouted power through the secondary conduits and boosted our defensive grid using some tricks I learned from studying their station technology. Lisa Carter worked at the navigation console with inhuman speed, her hands moving so fast they seemed to blur as she calculated intercept vectors while dodging incoming fire. Captain, I'm reading the lead ship as a modified heavy cruiser, probably stolen from a Class 4 civilization. 2 escort frigates flanking it, but their formation is sloppy. Amy Walsh had intercepted the raider communications and was analyzing their tactical patterns. They're using standard pirate protocols from the Outer Rim territories. Captain Sullivan is coordinating the attack from the Void Reaper, but he's not expecting any real resistance from the station's defensive forces. Jake studied the tactical display where red dots representing enemy ships moved in predictable patterns around the station. These pirates are thinking like raiders attacking a soft target. They've never faced military opposition from a moderate level species because the classification system told them it was impossible. The New Horizon accelerated toward the enemy formation with a burst of speed that caught the raiders completely off guard. Lisa had plotted a course that used the station's gravity well as a slingshot, adding velocity while making their approach vector almost impossible to predict. The alien ships responded slowly, their targeting system struggling to track the human vessel's erratic movement. "Incoming transmission from the lead raider," Amy announced. "Captain Sullivan wants to talk." "Put him through," Jake ordered. Curious to hear from the human pirate who had somehow escaped the Galactic classification system, the view screen flickered to life, showing a bearded man in a battered military uniform sitting in what looked like a jury-rigged command center. Captain Ben Sullivan had the weathered look of someone who had spent years in the dangerous outer regions of space, and his eyes held the calculating intelligence of a successful predator. "Well, well," Sullivan said with a cold smile. "Another human ship. I have to admit, I didn't expect to find any of our people this deep in alien space. You must be part of that diplomatic mission I heard about." "Captain Sullivan, you're attacking a civilian station with thousands of innocent beings aboard," Jake replied. "Stand down immediately and surrender your ships." Sullivan laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the bridge speakers. "Surrender? To what, exactly?" "You're flying around in a little exploration ship playing nice with the aliens who think we're barely worth their attention. These creatures classified us as moderate danger, Captain. Do you know what that means?" "It means they underestimated us," Jake said grimly. "Exactly," Sullivan continued. "They put us in the same category as traitors and diplomats. Meanwhile, I've been raiding their outer territories for 2 years, hitting their supply convoys and research stations. The aliens can't figure out how a moderate-level species could possibly threaten their precious galactic order." Amy Walsh was monitoring multiple communication channels and suddenly looked up with alarm. "Captain, he's right about one thing. The Galactic Security Forces don't have any protocols for dealing with human raiders. Their response systems are designed around the assumption that only high-level civilizations can mount serious military operations." Lisa Carter had been analyzing the enemy ships and noticed something disturbing. "Captain, those aren't just stolen alien vessels. Someone has been modifying them with human engineering principles. Look at those power signatures. They're using our adaptive technology integrated with alien hardware." Jake realized that Sullivan represented something the aliens had never encountered before, a moderate-level species that refused to accept the limitations of their classification. "Sullivan, whatever point you're trying to make, attacking civilian targets isn't the answer, isn't it?" Sullivan's expression turned serious. "These aliens treat us like children, Captain. They give us basic trading rights and pat us on the head while keeping all the real power for themselves. I'm showing them what happens when they underestimate humanity." The Void Reaper suddenly changed course, accelerating toward the station's main docking complex where thousands of beings were trapped by the ongoing battle. Jake realized that Sullivan wasn't just raiding for profit. He was trying to prove that humans could threaten galactic civilization despite their moderate classification. "All ships, attack pattern Delta," Jake ordered. Tony, give me everything the engines can handle. Lisa, plot an intercept course that puts us between Sullivan and the station. Amy, broadcast to all frequencies that we're engaging the raiders. The New Horizon shot forward with acceleration that should have crushed the crew, but Tony's modifications to the inertial compensators held. The ship moved through space like a dancer, using momentum and gravity in ways that confused the alien targeting systems. Lisa's navigation was so precise that she could thread the ship through debris fields that other pilots would consider impassable. The first Raider frigate opened fire with everything it had, but Amy had been analyzing their weapons patterns and fed the data to Lisa's evasion protocols. The New Horizon twisted through the energy barrage like it was dancing, returning fire with kinetic projectiles that punched through the alien ship's shields with devastating effect. "How are they doing that?" came Sullivan's voice over the communication channel, his confidence clearly shaken by the human ship's impossible maneuvers. Tony Rodriguez had been monitoring the enemy vessels and noticed a critical weakness. "Captain, they're using stolen alien technology without understanding the underlying principles. Their power distribution systems are inefficient, and their targeting computers can't adapt to non-standard flight patterns." Jake smiled grimly as he watched the second frigate struggle to match their speed and agility. "They're thinking like pirates who steal technology instead of engineers who create it. Amy, target their main power couplings. Lisa, bring us around for a strafing run. Tony, prepare the boarding shuttles." "Boarding shuttles?" Amy asked in surprise. "Captain, we're outnumbered 3-1. "Not for long," Jake replied as the New Horizon dove toward the Void Reaper like a bird of prey. Sullivan made one critical error in his reasoning. He assumed that because the aliens underestimated us, we must be as weak as they think we are. He's about to learn the difference between human raiders and human military. The boarding pods launched from the New Horizon like bullets fired from an invisible gun, racing across the void toward the Void Reaper while the larger ship provided covering fire. Marine Sergeant Dan Cooper led the assault team through the cramped confines of the first pod, checking his weapon systems one final time as they approached the enemy vessel's hull. 30 seconds to contact," announced Corporal Kate Murphy from the pilot's seat, her hands steady on the controls despite the enemy fire exploding around them. "Target zone is their main airlock, just like the captain ordered." Don keyed his radio to contact the other pods. "Alpha Team, remember these pirates have been using stolen alien technology for 2 years. They think they know what they're doing, but they've never fought humans who actually understand how to use our equipment properly." The boarding pod slammed into the Void Reaper's hull with bone-jarring force, but the magnetic clamps held firm as cutting torches began burning through the alien metal. Don could hear the hiss of escaping atmosphere as the pod's systems equalized pressure and prepared to breach the enemy ship's interior. Back on the station, Crixinel watched the impossible battle unfold through the observation windows of the command center. Station Commander Vorthak stood beside him, his massive frame trembling with confusion as he tried to process what his sensors were telling him. "The human vessel is moving faster than our computers can calculate," Vorthak reported, his voice filled with disbelief. "They are using gravitational forces in ways that should tear their ship apart, yet their hull integrity remains stable." "Perhaps our sensors are malfunctioning," Crixinel suggested weakly, though even he could see the evidence with his own eyes. The small human ship was dancing between the much larger raider vessels like a tiny fighter craft, but it was heavily armed and impossibly agile. Amy Walsh had established a direct communication link with the station's tactical center, feeding them real-time information about the battle that their own systems couldn't provide. "Station Control, the raiders are using modified Krellian energy weapons with Thurok targeting systems. Their weakness is the power coupling between the two. Technologies, target coordinates transmitting now." Tony Rodriguez was simultaneously running engineering support for the boarding operation while maintaining the New Horizon's impossible combat maneuvers. "Captain, I'm reading massive power fluctuations in the enemy flagship. Their alien technology is overloading because they don't understand the feedback loops between different systems. Jake Morrison coordinated the entire operation from his command chair, his mind processing tactical information faster than the alien computer systems could analyze it. Lisa, bring us around for another strafing run on the second frigate. Tony? How long before our boarding teams reach the enemy bridge? And Dan's team should be through their outer hull in 90 seconds, Tony replied, monitoring the boarding pod's progress through sensor feeds. The pirates are trying to seal off sections, but they're using standard alien security protocols that weren't designed to stop human assault tactics. Inside the Void Reaper, Don Cooper led his team through corridors that had been modified with a bizarre mixture of human and alien technology. Emergency lights cast strange shadows as they moved deeper into the ship, encountering resistance from pirates who seemed genuinely shocked that anyone would attempt a boarding action during a space battle. "Contact front," Kate Murphy called, out as they rounded a corner and came face to face with 3 raiders armed with alien energy weapons. The pirates fired immediately, but their shots went wide as the humans moved with trained precision that the alien classification system had never accounted for. Don returned fire with kinetic rounds that punched through the energy shields the pirates were wearing, dropping 2 of them instantly. The third raider tried to retreat but found himself facing Kate Murphy, who had flanked around through a maintenance shaft that the ship's original alien designers never intended for combat use. How did they get behind us so fast? The surviving pirate gasped as Kate disarmed him with movements too quick for his alien-enhanced reflexes to follow. "Because we don't fight like the moderate-level species you're used to dealing with," Don replied grimly as his team secured the corridor and moved toward their primary objective, the bridge of the Void Reaper, erupted in chaos as Captain Ben Sullivan realized that his ship was being systematically taken apart by opponents who refused to follow any predictable combat patterns. His alien crew members worked frantically at consoles they only partially understood, trying to coordinate a defense against an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once. "Sir, they've breached sections 4 through 7, reported his second. In command, a Velkan trader who had turned to piracy when legitimate commerce proved too restrictive. Our security teams are falling back on all fronts." Sullivan stared at the tactical display, where the New Horizon continued its impossible dance around his remaining escort ships. "This is insane. No moderate-level species should be capable of this kind of military operation. The Galactic classification system specifically prevents such scenarios." "Perhaps the classification system was wrong," suggested his tactical officer, a former Zephyrian scholar who had joined the Raiders after becoming disillusioned with Galactic bureaucracy. Before Sullivan could respond, the bridge doors exploded inward as Dan Cooper's assault team breached the final barrier. The pirates reached for their weapons but found themselves facing trained human soldiers who moved with deadly efficiency through the smoke and debris. "Captain Sullivan, you're under arrest for piracy and assault on civilian targets," Don announced, his weapon trained on the pirate leader while Kate Murphy and the rest of the team secured the bridge crew. Sullivan laughed bitterly as he raised his hands in surrender. "Under arrest? By whose authority?" "The Galactic Council doesn't recognize human military jurisdiction." "They will now," Don replied as Jake Morrison's voice came through the communication system. "Void Reaper, this is Captain Morrison. Your ship is captured and your escort vessels are disabled. Surrender immediately or face the consequences." On Station Kepler 7, Crixinel and Commander Vorthak watched in stunned silence as the human boarding teams transmitted surrender confirmations from all 3 Raider vessels. The entire battle had lasted less than an hour, and the humans had achieved a complete victory against forces that should have been far beyond the capabilities of a moderate level civilization. "Commander," Crixinel said quietly, "I believe we may need to reconsider our classification of the human species." Vorthak nodded slowly, his eyes still fixed on the tactical display where the New Horizon was already beginning rescue operations. "For the damaged station, contact the Galactic Council immediately. Tell them we have a situation that requires urgent attention from the Xenobiology Department." The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in the massive chamber on the capital world of Centauri Prime. 3 days after the incident at Station Kepler-7, Chief Analyst Zefter stood at the central podium, surrounded by holographic displays showing combat footage that had shaken the foundations of galactic civilization. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the tiered seating, their attention focused on the small figure who had made what was now being called the greatest classification error in Council history. "Honored representatives," Zefter began, his forearms trembling slightly as he addressed the assembly, "I must report that our xenobiology classification system has encountered what can only be described as a complete failure regarding the species known as humans from the planet Earth." The massive screens around the chamber lit up with recordings from Station Kepler-7. The assembled delegates watched in stunned silence as the human ship New Horizon performed maneuvers that violated everything they understood about moderate-level civilizations. The footage showed impossible acceleration patterns, tactical brilliance that surpassed military academies, and boarding operations that had captured 3 raider vessels in under an hour. The humans were classified as Moderate Danger Class 3. Based on standard biological and technological assessments, Zefter continued, his voice growing stronger as he presented his findings. However, our evaluation protocols failed to account for several critical factors that make this species uniquely dangerous. High Admiral Crexton of the Thurok military forces leaned forward in his seat, his massive frame casting shadows across the delegates near him. "Analyst Zefter, are you suggesting that our classification system is fundamentally flawed? The Thurok have used these protocols for over 1,000 cycles without significant error." "The protocols are not flawed for normal species," Zefter replied, manipulating his holographic displays to show comparative data. "However, humans possess what can only be described as adaptive intelligence that increases exponentially under stress conditions. When faced with impossible situations, they do not follow logical behavioral patterns." The screen showed Tony Rodriguez working on the station's power systems, somehow stabilizing alien technology, using principles that no trained engineer should have been able to understand in such a short time. The footage then shifted to Lisa Carter, calculating navigation solutions faster than quantum computers while under heavy enemy fire. "Furthermore," Zefter added, "humans demonstrate what they call improvisation, the ability to create solutions, using available resources in ways that were never intended by the original designers. This capability appears to be universal among their species." Representative Lixanar of the scholarly Zephyrian delegation raised one of her tentacles. "Surely this is simply a matter of recalibrating our assessment parameters. Many species show increased performance under stress." The screens changed to show Don Cooper and Kate Murphy moving through the Void Reaper's corridors, using maintenance shafts and ventilation systems as tactical advantages. The alien pirates they encountered had superior weapons and numbers, but the humans moved through the ship like they had designed it themselves. "Negative, Representative Lixanar," Zefter responded. "Human stress response does not merely increase existing capabilities. It appears to unlock entirely new forms of problem-solving." Captain Jake Morrison coordinated a complex military operation while simultaneously conducting diplomacy and technical analysis. No other moderate-level species has demonstrated such multitasking abilities. Station Commander Vorthak had been invited to testify, and his massive form approached the speaker's platform. "Honored Council, I witnessed these events personally. The human captain offered assistance during the crisis, and when we declined, based on standard protocols, he ignored our authority and engaged the enemy anyway." Murmurs spread through the assembly as delegates realized the implications. A moderate-level species had not only exceeded their classification limitations, but had actively defied galactic authority to do so. "Most disturbing," Vorthak continued, "is that their actions were completely successful. They defeated forces that should have been beyond their capabilities, rescued thousands of beings, and captured the raiders alive for questioning. We can find no fault with their conduct except that it violated everything we believed possible." Amy Walsh's voice came through the chamber's speakers as her recorded communications played. The delegates listened to her effortlessly managing multiple alien languages while coordinating combat operations and diplomatic protocols simultaneously. The translation systems had recorded her accessing restricted military frequencies and, somehow, understanding tactical information that should have required years of specialized training. The human communications officer bypassed security protocols that have protected galactic civilization for centuries, admitted Chief Security Coordinator Thexville. When questioned, she claimed she was simply following standard human emergency procedures. According to her species, accessing any available information during a crisis is considered normal behavior. The final piece of evidence appeared on the screens: Captain Ben Sullivan under arrest aboard his own ship. The human pirate had been operating successfully for 2 years specifically because the classification system made it impossible for galactic authorities to imagine that moderate-level species could pose serious military threats. Council members, Zephyr concluded, we must face the reality that our understanding of species classification is incomplete. The humans have demonstrated capabilities that exist outside our current framework. They do not fit into any existing category. Hi. Admiral Crexton stood, his commanding presence filling the chamber. What classification do you recommend for immediate implementation? Zephyr manipulated his controls and new text appeared on all displays throughout the chamber. The Xenobiology Department recommends immediate reclassification to Extreme. Caution, Class Unknown. All human requests should be granted maximum diplomatic priority. Military cooperation protocols should be activated immediately. Furthermore, he continued, we recommend that humans be invited to join the Galactic Defense Council as strategic advisors. Their unconventional thinking patterns may be crucial for identifying other classification errors before they become security threats. The vote was unanimous, something that had never happened in Council history. Within hours, new protocols were transmitted to every galactic facility, warning that human capabilities should never be underestimated and that their species possessed unique, problem-solving abilities that made them extremely valuable allies. Jake Morrison received the official communication while his ship was still docked at Station Kepler 7, helping with repairs and rescue operations. Crixinel delivered the message personally, his attitude completely transformed from condescending diplomat to respectful colleague. Captain Morrison, the alien said formally, the Galactic Council extends an official invitation for humanity to join the galactic community as a full member, civilization with immediate access to all technological and cultural exchange programs. They have also requested that you personally accept the position of strategic military advisor. Jake smiled as he looked out at the vast station where humans and aliens now work side by side, the artificial barriers of classification finally removed. Tell the Council that humanity accepts their invitation, but remind them that we prefer to be partners, not rulers. We work better when everyone contributes their unique strengths. The greatest classification error in galactic history had become humanity's ticket to the stars.